Okay, my friends, it has been a while since I've done one of these, but here is a 2023 installment of History Swiftly, and I am in St. Augustine, Florida. So a little bit about the history of this area. Juan Ponce de Leon poked around here in 1513 and claimed the land for Spain. Afterwards, the French and the Spanish attempted to colonize this area, but nothing really took hold until 1565 when Spanish King Philip II dispatched the military to establish a base and attacked the French that were here. And it all happened on the feast day of St. Augustine in 1565, so that's why they call it St. Augustine. So it is one of the earliest settlements here in North America, and we're going to poke around this beautiful old city a little bit today. So this is the Puente de los Caños de San Francisco. I probably butchered the Spanish there a little bit, but this set of masks that decorate this fountain was a gift to the city of St. Augustine by its sister city in Spain, the city of Aviles, birthplace of Pedro Menendez, who founded St. Augustine in 1565. And these are a sort of replica of the ones that are in the city of Aviles, Spain. So this is a low coquina wall that behind it houses a Huguenot or Protestant cemetery. During the yellow fever outbreak of 1821, the town officials, who were pretty overwhelmed, needed to bury a number of non-Catholics here in St. Augustine. And because they weren't Catholic, and because St. Augustine is a Spanish territory, which was predominantly Roman Catholic, they couldn't be buried at the Catholic cemetery. Therefore, they needed a separate plot, and this is that plot with many 19th century graves, many of whom died from yellow fever. Across the way is the fort, and we're going to visit the fort in a couple of minutes here, but while I'm standing where I am, I'm just going to do a little pan and scan, and you're going to see what was known as the old Kubo line, which was a line of earthenworks and palmetto logs to be able to protect the city from any sort of invaders. And we have an original gate that is here from the very early 19th century. It's over 200 years old, and it would have been protecting the inner parts of the town, which we will stroll through in a little bit. Okay, behind me is the fort that would protect the town of St. Augustine. It's along the San Sebastian River. The fort was begun in 1672. It was finished in 1695. It is the oldest masonry fort in all of North America. So I'm going to walk around it a little bit, take some videos of the outside of it, and give you a little bit of history about the construction of it. The fort has walls that are 12 feet thick at the base. It has the ability to have over 70 cannon. You can see some of the cannon actually up at the top there. I'm told that they fire the cannons at 3 p.m. so it's early in the morning on Saturday, but I'm going to do my best to try to come back at 3 p.m. to hear those cannons go. So it looks like we're going to get a firing this morning too. Let's wait and see. So when this fort was finished, this was the northernmost point of the Spanish Empire, which expanded really the entire globe and was the largest empire in the entire world then and now. So one of the reasons why this fort is pretty impenetrable is because of the stone that they actually used to make it. It's made out of coquina, which is a porous limestone, but it's unique in that it is compressed seashells that have been compressed for thousands of years that they used to build the walls, the stone walls behind me. And then the Spanish took a plastered over it to keep it sort of watertight, and it is sort of impossible to blast through with cannonballs, which is why it's still standing after all of these hundreds of years. So I'm back at the walls of the town, the outside walls of the town, and we're going to start to walk through the town. Be forewarned, it's awfully crowded even for an early Saturday morning. So this is the oldest wooden schoolhouse in the United States. I have no idea what the oldest schoolhouse in the United States would be, made out of brick or stone. I can't even find a date on this one, but it's made out of cedar and cypress, put together with wooden pegs, handmade nails, served as a guardhouse during the 19th century Seminole Wars. And if we take a closer look at it, you'll notice that it is listing to the left pretty good. I don't know if that's easy to see on this, but it is leaning to the left pretty good there. So anyway, oldest wooden schoolhouse in the United States. Date, no idea. Okay, so a little bit of Greek history here in St. Augustine. A colonizing ship of about 500 Greeks sailed from Smyrna, Crete, and Mani to the New World in 1768. They stopped here in St. Augustine for fresh supplies, but then they continued to the south and went to New Smyrna, but that failed. And about 10 years later, they came back to St. Augustine and found refuge within the walls of St. Augustine. So I'm inside the Greek shrine now. This is purportedly the oldest Greek settlement here in the Americas. Trying to give you a little bit of a sense of the beautiful architecture here in St. Augustine. This is St. George Street in St. Augustine. It is a very warm, unseasonably warm, sunny day in February. I am certainly not complaining about that. It's going to go up to about 85 degrees, and I'm finding a little piece of shade here to be able to get you at least a little bit of a video without too much sun glare. So this is the main strip here. Obviously there's some side streets that we'll try to get some photos of, and that's it. So behind me is the oldest parish church in the United States. The parish dates back to 1565. It is the parish of St. Augustine, and I'm going to flip the camera around so we can take a little bit better look at it. So we are right off of St. George Street at Cathedral Square, and here is the church. It began, the Cathedral of St. Augustine, with within 48 hours of San Pedro Menendez's landing here on September 8th, 1565, when they held a celebratory mass. And then after the British ceded Florida back to Spain in 1784, the Spanish crown ordered the construction of this parish. Cornerstone was laid in 1793. The first mass was conducted on December 8th, 1797. And that bell tower there was designed by James Renwick, who was an architect famous for some of his work at the Smithsonian and St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. He sort of drew up the plans for that bell tower. So we'll go around to the front of it so you can take another look at the church. So here we are in the Plaza de Constitucion. It's the oldest public square in America. It was laid out by Spanish royal ordinances in 1573. The Constitution Monument, which you can see sort of in the center there, may be the only remaining monument in all of the Western Hemisphere celebrating the Spanish Constitution. So this plaza celebrating the Constitution of Spain, 1573, and across the street here is where you're going to see the Cathedral of St. Augustine again, and the bell tower all the way up there. So directly next to the church is the one and only, the first and the last skyscraper ever built in Old St. Augustine here. 6 stories, Mediterranean influence, has a mezzanine, constructed in 1928 for the First National Bank. Today it's a Wells Fargo. So before we cross over the river, here is a statue of Juan Ponce de Leon, who landed in this same spot around the year 1513, and in this square they have a statue of him, which is all of 4 feet 11 inches, which is what they say his actual height was, 4 feet 11. So we're going to take a stroll over the river here. Behind me, you're going to see that there are 2 lions flanking either side of this bridge. They were gifts from Florence, Italy. They're copies, Medici lions, copies of 2 that are in Florence, Italy, because Ponce de Leon in Spanish means lion. Across the street here is the governor's house. For more than 225 years, between 1595 and then until 1821, when the United States eventually took Florida. This was a site that served as the headquarters for the Spanish, the English, Spanish again, and eventually when 1821 came about and the United States took it from Spain, there was not much left to it. So behind me is the Alcaraz Hotel, which was opened up by Henry Flagler in December 25th, 1888. Today it's a museum and part of the St. Augustine City Hall. So here is the Casa Monica, named after the African mother of St. Augustine, who was the Bishop of Hippo. The building is from the late 19th century, and it is directly next to, again, the sort of hotel, the Alcaraz Hotel, that was built by Henry Flagler, who is one of the more prominent individuals here in St. Augustine. 19th century, 1888, and I'm just going to keep rotating all the way around, and we are going to see a beautiful fountain, and then Flagler College, directly across the street here in Old St. Augustine, and I'll head over there in a minute. So this is the inside courtyard of that hotel, the Hotel Alcaraz, and you can see it's not too shabby. So originally this was Ponce de Leon Hotel. It was made by Henry Flagler to sort of attract money down into Florida. He made his wealth, as I said, with Standard Oil, and he wanted to attract businessmen to Florida, so he had this incredibly opulent hotel that was built. It has Tiffany stained glass windows, and it was completely electrified by Thomas Edison. Eventually, it would be converted to Flagler College. I can't tell you a whole lot about Flagler College, other than they're quite proud of the fact, as there are a bunch of banners out, that it is ranked number 2 in U.S. News and World Report for Southern Regional Colleges. So Henry Flagler was the son of a Presbyterian minister, and when he came to St. Augustine, he probably attended worship services at a parish that was on this site, but not this particular church. This church is in honor of his granddaughter and daughter. Unfortunately, tragedy struck too often for Henry Flagler. His wife had died years earlier, and when his daughter was preparing to give childbirth, unfortunately, his granddaughter died just hours after being born. So he arranged to have his daughter from New York City, come to St. Augustine to recover. And unfortunately, she died along the way. And out of their honor, he built this magnificent church for them in their honor. It is of the Venetian Renaissance style. The copper dome, that's copper up top, the copper dome is meant to sort of resemble that on obviously a much smaller scale, St. Mark's in Venice. I tried to go in to get some photos for you, but there's a service going on inside. Didn't want to interrupt that, obviously. I can tell you this, it was built in 361 days. The interior is it's all mahogany, and any of the stonework is done by Italian craftsmen. So I can only imagine it's equally as beautiful inside as it is outside. So here we are just outside of the walls of old St. Augustine to Tolomato Cemetery. And this cemetery was used for both Indian converts, Native American converts to Christianity, and Franciscan monks. It was established in the 18th century, and the last burial here was in 1892. So for those of you that subscribe to and watch all the History Swiftly videos, you know that there are always a couple of things that are included. It seems to be always cemeteries and, of course, ice cream. Went with something a little savory this time. Had sweet last night with key lime pie, peanut butter the night before, today pistachio. Cheers. So the only place outside of Florence, Italy to see an exact copy of Michelangelo's David is St. Augustine. This is an exact replica. It stands 17 feet tall, it weighs 10 tons. The only other one that exists in the world is in the Piazza in Florence, Italy, and this one has been here for over 50 years. It is carved out of one piece of Carrara marble, the same quarry that Michelangelo used to create his masterpiece of David just before he slays Goliath with his slingshot and stone. In front of me is an incredibly old and beautiful live oak tree. They're called live oak because they're a deciduous tree, but because they never lose their leaves because of the warm climate, it is a live oak tree. It is covered in moss like they usually are, and it is about 600 years old, which means the senator, that's the name of this tree, would have been here when Ponce de Leon and other Spanish conquistadors would have first seen this land. So I have spent the day here putting together this tour of St. Augustine. I had a great time doing it. There is a peacock on the other side here, and I've been wondering what this crazy sound is. And I've heard peacocks before, but I forgot how odd they sound. I'll get a photo of one in a second. It's a male peacock, but his feathers aren't up. I'm not really sure how to get the feathers to go up. But anyway, if you hear a weird sound that almost sounds like a cat crying, that's a baby crying. Anyway, I'm at the Fountain of Youth here, and this is an archaeology site at St. Augustine. I am not going to go in because the cards are sort of stacked against me. First, they're closing. Second, it costs money. Third, I don't think it's true. If I drink from it, I'll live forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to eat well. I'm going to get lots of exercise. I like to do lots of walking. I'm going to avoid any bad food, except for ice cream, and that's about it. So I hope you had a great tour with me today. I certainly loved St. Augustine, and we're gonna have to plan something again soon.